with me today, Chris Pihakis. He is amateur professional wrestler. How are you, Chris? Thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it depends on who you ask. I consider professional getting paid, but then some people consider professional making a living at it. So
okay. So how did you get into this as a kid, or?
Well, yeah. I was in high school during the wrestling boom of the late '90s. You know, the NWO and Stone Cold Steve Austin and all that. Basically, when everybody got back into wrestling, or at least adults did. And I just decided that that's something I wanted to pursue. And I knew that the first step, which if there are young guys listening to this that want to get in wrestling, listen to me very carefully. The first step is go to the gym. It drives me absolutely crazy when guys walk up to me and they're either they're frail, looking like they've never touched a weight, or they're excessively obese, looking like they've never touched a weight, and they say, "This is all I've ever wanted to do." I say, "Well, have you seen wrestling before?" Yes. Okay. Then have you noticed the difference in the body types in the guys that are doing this, and then you? You know, it's like that's all you need to see to be able to know I need to go to the gym. So step one was go to the gym. So I went and I joined a gym literally the day after I graduated from high school. And I mean, I woke up in someone's yard and I drove down and paid this place $400 for a year's membership. And I just started working out. I realized I needed a trainer, so I hired a personal trainer. And I'm getting in shape. And then one day a guy came through that had been a wrestler before. And at the time, you know, it's certainly a lot harder, or it was a lot harder then than it is now. Now you just Google wrestling schools, and there's quite a bit of them. Now, whether or not they're legitimate or not, it's another thing. But just somewhere to get in a ring and learn something was what I was looking for. And, you know, at that time in the late '90s, it was kind of hard to find places like that. So you kind of had to get like a wrestling magazine and pull addresses out of there and write them letters and stuff like that. So that's what I was working on. And then I met this guy at the gym. He told me about a group down in Montgomery, which, you know, I was in Pelham. So this was Alabama, that is, for anybody who's not local. And, you know, so we're talking about an hour drive for me. So I'm like, that's perfect. You know, I don't have to move to Texas, you know. And so I would drive down there a couple times a week and would start training with these guys. And from there, they were able to get me on to some of the lower level shows, and then kind of gradually move up into, you know, better ones.
So when you have a match coming up or whatever, I mean, a lot of people probably don't know how much that is put into it, preparing, like, you know, choreographing what's going to take place. And that seems like a lot to remember.
Yeah. And, you know, this is a source of a lot of controversy in modern wrestling, in that it's always been kind of the temptation, if you will, for younger guys to plan out more. And you can always kind of tell when you're with a veteran guy, because he would not really want to talk about much. He's like, man, let's just get out there, feel it. Now, I will say that's a lot easier to do at the independent level, the local level shows, because your crowds aren't as big. And so they're not as loud as like a 20,000 person stadium would be. But then also, when someone buys a ticket to an independent wrestling show, they're doing it with the expectation that they're going to get to interact with the performers. So crowd interaction is actually a really huge thing at that level. So with that being, you know, and with keeping that in mind, you know, you don't want to have this huge plan, because, you're wrestling for, anywhere from 100 to 500 people, whereas, on the WWE, their smallest crowd is their non-televised shows, which sometimes might be as low as 5,000. But that's about the smallest crowd they'll ever be around. So, 5,000 people, wanting the same thing is not necessarily going to happen. But if you get into a small local crowd of about 100 people, it's real possible that they're going to be kind of come in a certain direction with you. So you've got to go out there and figure out what direction that is. Some of these crowds would prefer some of the entertainment value stuff, the different, like false starts, things like that, where the, the bad guy or the heel, as we refer to them, will, go out of the ring and hide and stuff like that. Just the entertainment value stuff is more appealing. And some of them might want a little bit more action. So you got to kind of go out and fill out the crowd and see, what direction they want you to go. And so there's definitely an art to it. Now, me personally, I never really liked calling a whole lot before. I might hit a few high points. I might plan a start and a finish, and that's pretty much it. Everything else in the middle would be ad-libbed, which is not really something that I recommend an inexperienced guy do, because I think they should learn to do it, but know where you're at. If you're more comfortable calling everything in advance, which, to answer your original question, as far as the preparation, in the WWE, they rehearse their matches for weeks at a time. You don't really have that luxury in independent wrestling. In independent wrestling, you might end up meeting the person you're going to wrestle an hour before you wrestle them. So you don't really have a lot of time to work on stuff. You just kind of have to walk through it in the back. And that I'm personally a believer that it should all just be ad-libbed in the ring. It makes for such a much better performance. I was a part of a show down in Atmore, Alabama, a couple years ago. I went down there, once a month, and there were some young guys that they were bringing in there from a school in Georgia. It's actually Robert Gibson's school. Anybody who grew up watching NWA and early WCW will remember the Rock and Roll Express, Robert Gibson and Ricky Morton. And so Robert was sending his students up there, and I wrestled several of them, and you could tell they were used to pretty much preparing everything. And so the one guy, I was in kind of a bad mood because the promoter had informed me that he was turning me heel, which I didn't too much mind that much, because I like being heel, but I also wanted to make some extra money selling pictures that night. I'm like, well, crap, I can't do that if you're turning me heel. But at least a good heel shouldn't sell pictures unless somebody's buying it to throw darts at it. And that actually reminds me, I'm going to rabbit trail some just because, that's fun. An old performer by the name of Mike Jackson, who I respect quite a bit, but I never really enjoyed working for. But you can't deny that it's amazing that he's still doing what he's doing. He's 70 years old. I asked him for a raise one time because I told him it wasn't worth my time to come up there. And he said, well, you can sell pictures. I said, Mike, I'm a heel. He said, well, I'm fine with heels selling pictures. I said, well, Mike, if I was a heel that could sell pictures, then I wouldn't be of value to you as a heel. And he looked at me and he said, you're right. But I'm still not giving you a raise. So, anyway, so that night in Atmore, I was in kind of a bad mood over the heel turn, and I was wrestling this young kid, and he comes up, he says, hey, Chris, did you want to talk about the match? And I said, no, and just walked off. And he kept following me around, and he said, did so you didn't want to go over like anything? I said, no, and I walked off again. And this isn't a huge area in the back, so I mean, he's just kind of following me around. So finally, I said, "All right, here's how we end it. So how do we begin it?" I said, "I don't know. I guess I'll figure it out when I get out there." So we went and we actually had a really good match. And he came up to me after and he said, "Man, that was awesome." And I said, "Exactly. You know, it's like, dude, do what you did in the playroom with your brother growing up, where y'all didn't talk about your matches when you reenacted the matches from TV. You didn't say, 'Hey, all right, 5 minutes in, I'm going to super kick you and then cover, and then you're going to kick out at 2.5. No, you just did it. And like, if you can figure that out at 7, then you can figure it out at 27. You know, is the way I look at that.
Well, I DDT'd a kid in the library one time and went straight down on the concrete, so I'm not sure if we should do that.
Well, yeah, you definitely want to steer away from shoot DDTs in concrete. It's like that. Although, you know, I'll be honest with you, there's guys that there's a lot of guys out there these days that don't belong in the ring. And you know, I had a guy DDT me one time, and I tried to sell it real well because I trusted him. Well, it turns out I shouldn't have, because as soon as he took me down, I felt a shot go all the way down my spine. I'm like, look, if you DDT me and I feel it in my ass, it's not a good thing.
Oh man, yeah. So that just sounds so dangerous. That brings up another question. So how bad does that hurt? Those slaps in the chest. I mean, 'cause that sounds real.
Oh my God, the chops are like the most painful thing in wrestling. I mean, as long as you don't botch something and break somebody's neck. I mean, I'm like, dude, I'd rather get hit with a chair than take a chop.
So how do y'all pick out who's going to be the heel and the hero, or the good guy, or whatever?
Well, most of the time you have an established, you know, heel or baby face, as we call it. And a lot of guys have a preference of what they want to do. And it's really a matter of finding your own character and seeing what works for you. It's not always what you like doing. You know, I kind of like both of them. I like doing both. You know, like I've always been a big baby face in my own hometown when I put on local shows, because I mean, most of the people who are going to attend the show know me, so they're not ever going to boo me. And you know, maybe when I go out of town, go down south, I'd or go to the smaller towns, like in Jasper and Wetumpka. It's a lot of fun to be a heel. I mean, you've got a lot of ammunition. Yeah, you got a lot of ammo. You know, and you know, I mean, I've seen some stuff in those. Oh, Sylacauga is another one too. There was a guy that would attend all our Sylacauga shows, and I was actually worried about his health, because the way he yelled at the heels, you know, I really was afraid that he might have a heart attack. And I asked somebody one time, like, one of the phrases we use in wrestling is smart. And smart just simply means that you understand what the business is, you know, that you know it's what we call, you know, a work, you know, that it's entertainment. And I went up to a guy and I said, "Man, does that guy know? Is he smart to the business?" And he said, "I don't think so." I said, "Really?" And did I just lose you? I think I just lost you. I think I was. Oh yeah, I was talking about. I was talking about the the Jasper crowd and
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, so so you can get just a whole lot of. Did you go away again?
No, I'm still here.
Okay, for some reason your picture went away. Um. Anyway, so you get a lot of ammo with the Jasper crowd, and it's fun. And then we had I was talking about that guy in Sylacauga, and I mean this guy. It was really awkward because he was a traveling wrestling fan. He would go to the Sylacauga shows about 45 minutes south of Birmingham, and then he would end up in Jasper, which is probably an hour and a half away from him, and then I didn't expect that he used the internet. No offense to him, but he ended up at one of my Birmingham shows, and it was one of my ministry shows where I was a baby face, a big baby face, and I'm like, so there was actually several fans from Sylacauga who made their way to that Birmingham show. And it was really awkward because I was doing the baby face thing, glad handing the crowd. And there was this one lady that, I walked up to her when she did. She literally looked at me like I had pulled a gun on her. And I'm like, "You look familiar. Do I know you from somewhere?" She's like, "Sylacauga." And I'm like, "Oh, shit." And because the Sylacauga show at the time, I was the most hated heel. I was the champion, all that. And I'm like, "Oh, you must have seen my twin brother Aaron there. God, that guy's a dick." And but unfortunately, I had to ruin that lady's life that night and tell her that wrestling wasn't, I don't like using the words real or fake. I like using the words scripted and orchestrated, if you will. But
because people
find and the only reason about that is because that's a good segue into the message I want to send to the younger generation. I never really made it that far in wrestling, so I'm not here to say that I have the recipe for success. If you want the recipe for success, go listen to guys like Chris Jericho, Lance Storm, all those guys that have been a success all these years and were on TV and worked their way up. I'm not here to give you that recipe because my recipe didn't exactly pan out, but I had a lot of fun. I saw what it was like to be on the lower levels, saw the mid levels. I saw all that, and it was a great experience for me. It's one that I still. I'm only a couple weeks away from turning 40, and I still do it all the time, and I enjoy it. And if there's anything that gets in the way of it, it is not. It's not age, it's not injuries, it is time. It's, I've got to have a full-time paying job and I've got to have time with my family. And, ultimately I had to, surrender that as the priority. And, but I do, when it comes to the words real and fake, I don't like the word fake because we all know people who have been severely injured in this. We all know people who, whose lives were completely changed by those injuries. And I don't want to disrespect them by saying the word fake. Even myself not being injured, not paralyzed or anything like that, but waking up every day in pain. I fake's the wrong word. People don't go to Hollywood stuntmen and say, what you do is fake. I mean, it seems like, explain. I mean, I think I think Hollywood stuntmen just maybe have a worse injury track record than wrestlers do. So, I don't know that they would appreciate that, and I don't appreciate the use of the word either. So no F words. The real when it comes to using the term real, like, one thing that really bothers me is that wrestling is real. It's just not what you think it is. There's a very real competition involved, even though the outcomes are predetermined, and even though other aspects of it are contrived. There's a very real competition, and I feel like modern wrestling has eliminated that real competition, because it used to be, hey, go out and sell yourself to the crowd. We're not going to write your lines for you. We're not going to choreograph your matches for you. It comes down to you. That's the real competition. Can you pick up a microphone and make the crowd want to listen to you, heel or babyface? Can you make them want to see you? That's the competition. And that is what has been eliminated in modern wrestling, especially in WWE. I don't really watch AEW. It's just not my thing. I don't watch WWE anymore either, but I know that this has been going on for the last 10 or 15 years where, it's almost like they've tried to create their type of wrestler, and they write their lines for them. They craft their matches for them. It almost seems like the wrestlers themselves don't have any input. And, what I always loved about wrestling is how much input I had into it. And naturally, at the higher levels, there's a little bit more control. But And it's understandable that an organization like WWE, I mean, when it started out, it was a regional show up in the Northeast. It was a regional show up in the Northeast. And now it's this international, publicly traded company, and there's obviously some different standards that have to be involved. But I also believe that you can do different things to meet those standards without tearing out the soul of your business. And that's what I think they've done. And I mean, if you kind of think, Chris, if you think back to like how we met, the company we worked for, it grew. But I do feel like they did do a fairly good job hanging on to the soul of the business.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there's aspects that changed, and no, it wasn't like it was in 1985, but they maintain that foundation, and that's still do to this day as best they can. And, but when you try to control it too much like that, and you're not giving your talent the creative liberty to establish themselves, and you're trying to establish them yourself in your image, why would you even need that person? It could be any person, fill in the blank. If you're just going to write their lines, if you're going to craft their matches, if you're going to develop their outfit, if you're going to give them their nicknames, I mean, it doesn't make any sense. You've completely eliminated what actually was real about wrestling. And I think that right now in modern wrestling is 100% a work for the first time in its history. If you go back to when it first started, early 1900s even, it started off 100% legitimate and real. And then slowly but surely, to add to entertainment value, little things kind of got tweaked. And I feel like we've kind of been on that steep incline ever since, where it's like you keep adding a little bit more, keep adding a little bit more, keep adding a little bit more, and now it's basically like a live sitcom. And I feel like we need to get the soul of the industry back and reintroduce the real competition. If a wrestler makes it, it should be on his merit alone. And I'm not saying the matches should become real again. No, that would be boring. Let the matches be predetermined. That's fine. It doesn't have to go, we don't have to go UFC, but let everything else become a competition again. Put a microphone in their hands and say, go establish yourself. Let them do their own matches. That can be a very real competition in an industry that's entertainment. And I'm afraid to say it, but until that real part of wrestling is recovered, I don't ever see wrestling being what it once was. And,
So,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just rambling at that point. You go ahead.
So how big did it take over, or even today, how big is it? Steroids.
Steroids?
Yeah.
Oh man, I didn't think.
Even a roid rage that night assaulted me, and I'm crippled.
You know what's funny about that is that was a natural roid rage. There's certain people that I've known in my life that could elicit a roid rage out of me when I'm 100% clean. Maybe muscle memory. Like, you remember that time you raged? Let's do it now. But one of them Stan, and you certainly are in my top, maybe not top 3, but my top 5 easily. That I don't need the roids to rage on certain people. Certain people just elicit rage naturally.
That warms my heart to know that I could get up on your skin. That you're so laid back and nice. I got on your skin that mad to make you want to violently hurt me.
Well, for us guys that are laid back and nice, what y'all people don't realize is that in that moment where we lost it, we got to make up for lost time. We got to say, okay, all those times that I looked the other way, I'm going to hit you for every one of them right now. What was funny? What was really funny is that one time that you actually did get a little hurt. Well, I wasn't trying to hurt you at all. I was just goofing off, and you slipped, and I'm like, "Whoops."
Well, it's because I have no balance. Once that stuff messing up.
Yeah. I think I still have the picture of you laying on the floor with all the money around you.
Yeah,
that's got to be. I mean, I think Heather that took that picture. She's like, "Oh my God, don't move! This is hilarious." And I'm sitting there like, "No, don't take the picture. Don't take it."
I was on that.
I thought it was Heather, but I don't know. No, it was. It was Heather because I know for a fact Lynette. This is while Lynette was. I think it was before. No, it was.
It's in 2015.
Okay, so I know. Yeah. Lynette was long gone. She had already quit as GM because she quit as GM while I was away when my grandmother passed away. Yeah. And because when I came back from that, she was gone. And I'm kind of doing this by somebody's name I don't want to mention because I know exactly when I started dating that person. And I remember going outside and calling her after I accidentally hurt you, going, "I'm screwed. He's gonna sue me." So,
yeah, I should have done that. I could have.
Yeah, it's too late now, buddy.
Yeah, it's way too late now. So
I mean, although you do have me on recording admitting that I did it and could have been sued, but
Probably a statute of limitations on it.
I mean, the asteroid's going to hit the Earth before the court case will go into effect.
Yeah, now it would. So, was it ever big? I mean, was it as big as what they made it out to be?
Oh, absolutely. It's funny to me that, I don't know what it is about steroids. Maybe it was because of the big, FBI investigation that they did on the WWE, then WWF back in the 90s. But for some reason, no matter how bitter and jaded an ex-wrestler is, these older guys that were in the WWF and all that, a lot of them are bitter and jaded and will talk some major shit about, can I cuss on here?
Yeah.
Okay. They will talk some major shit about McMahon and everybody else in the WWE. But for some reason, none of them will ever admit to seeing anyone use steroids, which it's bullshit. It's like, I was once taught the eye test when I mentioned that gym I walked into. On the day I walked into that gym, I was talking to a friend of mine there, and he was telling me about the guys who were on steroids. And I said, "Oh, really? They are? They are?" He goes, "Look, if you have to ask yourself, is that guy on steroids? The answer is yes. Always. Because there's just certain things that don't happen naturally. Men in their mid-30s sprouting 20 pounds of solid rock doesn't happen. It just does not. You're going to have a heck of a time putting on lean muscle after 25 years old. It's going to be a challenge. It's going to take so much. So anytime you have this guy that just is bigger than natural, he has at least done steroids at some point in time in his life. And there was one time, and once again, I don't know why they're afraid to talk about this. I think it's the stigma that steroids has on it. The public who doesn't understand it is, it's so much more rampant than you realize. There's so many more people that use it. Now there's so many people who use it legally. It's not hard. If you're over the age of 30, your testosterone levels probably be low enough that a doctor will give it to you. But everybody views steroids as like this because of those stupid after school specials that they ran in the early 90s. It's almost like they look at it as the Captain America drug. They put you in the little chamber and you come out and you're the superhuman. That's not the way it works. You're taking a natural hormone that the body produces and just simply saying, you know what? God didn't give me the body of an athlete, so I'll make a little tweak. I'm gonna add a little to it. Not that I want to turn this conversation this direction, but last time I checked, it seems to be pretty acceptable to say my genetics aren't this, so I can change it, right? Well, maybe my genetics aren't that of an athlete, and I want to be an athlete. So I'm not, and I identify as an athlete, yeah. So, and let me just be clear as something. I'm not encouraging anyone to take steroids. I actually do think it's a bad thing. And yes, there are harmful side effects to it. And so all I'm trying to say is that it is not the vicious poison that it is viewed as in the eyes of the ignorant public. And so I do think it's a bad idea, but I don't understand why it has this stigma attached to it that, somebody like Kurt Angle will admit to taking 80 Vicodin a day, but he won't admit to taking, 1 milligram of testosterone. So I don't understand that. And, but so at those top tier levels, which you're starting to see more of the non-steroid guys right now, but it was pretty well known, in the early 2000s, 2001, 2002, 2003, that 98% of the WWE roster was on steroids. And, you know, they all, at one time, I'm not going to name my source, but at one time, an insider in WWE showed us the roster. He was a scout, and he showed some guys the roster, and he said, look, you've got the Hardys, two of them, the Hardy brothers, and Rikishi. Those are your three who aren't on juice. That's it. Every other member of the main roster was loaded. So, you know, but at the independent level, it's not very common. It's not like something where
You've used?
I have.
Oh, I knew. I could tell a few years ago you went about 6.
Oh yeah, I blew up here. Yeah. I've used. You know, I mean, I'm not afraid to admit it. You know, I like I said, I want to be a power lifter. You know, so you know, there. You know,
so so testosterone is. I mean, steroids is nothing more than just testosterone.
Well, for the most part.
Okay.
And there's lots of different versions of them. I mean, that you do have some basics that of like your testosterone, one called DECA, you know, I mean, these are therapeutics at the end of the day. And then, I mean, the testosterone, now some guys will go and start doing some really crazy stuff like the anabol and all that. That's just like, man, or growth hormone. I mean, growth hormone is exactly what it says it is. I mean, it literally makes everything in your body grow, and including your heart. And most of the guys who have died from steroid use is from growth hormone because they died of heart disease. You know, the Ultimate Warrior and the British Bulldog, you know, both died from heart complications, and they both were, it was known that tinkered with growth hormone, especially in the 90s when maybe not everybody realized the danger of it.
Okay. Yeah,
but I think to be fair, I do believe that in addition to that, the Ultimate Warrior had a history in his family of heart disease as well. So just full disclosure, just to be fair.
Because when you said that about about, you know, older guys putting on muscle, and I was looking at something a while back of, wasn't that long ago, of Stallone at 74 years old. I mean, this guy's just, he's bigger than he was in his 30s. I was like, man, that's not right. He's 75 years old.
I mean, and the one that kind of irritates me is like The Rock. I mean, because like if you look at The Rock when he was just in wrestling, like before he went to Hollywood, and he's like 24 years old and, you know, peak athletic condition. But if you take a side-by-side photo of him then, look at him in 1998 and look at him now.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, just like, how is this guy? He's got to be close to 50 years old now. I don't know how old he is, but I mean, and he just keeps getting bigger and bigger. But now given, and don't get me canceled for racism, but Samoans have some outstanding genetics for bodybuilding. They are just
those guys
freaks. I mean, and you know, he's definitely got some great genetics, but I still wouldn't expect him to look better at 45 than he did 25. I mean,
in the Army, these guys were they had to get waivers all the time because they couldn't pass the height and weight test. It wasn't they were fat. It's just the Army had these, you had to be slim and you could be 6'4",
yeah.
you know, 190 pounds. These
yeah.
guys 140 pounds.
Well, body mass index is a really horrible thing to measure because it doesn't measure what the mass is. It could be muscle, it could be fat, you know, but because there's been times that I've had a body fat percentage of like maybe 10 or 11%, but my body mass has registered as obese. And I'm like, well, explain that one to me. How could I have 10% body fat yet a body mass index that says I'm obese? because the body mass index doesn't calculate for, the bone structure is another one. Some people are short and wide, some people are tall and slender, and some shorter people actually look like they are supposed to be that size, but then some others, it looks like they just somewhere stopped and things got stuck. So, it doesn't seem like it's a very good or accurate way to measure health.
So what's your wrestling name?
The wrestling name I wrestled under most of my career was Chris Ace. Cheesy as hell, but my original trainer was a guy named Tony Spade, and he wanted us to be tag team partners. And so Ace and Spade, and then he had me turn on him, and so I was the Ace of Spades, and the idea was, he's like, just use this name, it kind of sucks, but they told me, for your first year, use a name you're not in love with, because you're going to have a lot of bad matches. And it's a learning curve, not to be discouraged, but, you want to eventually be able to just scrape the name. And that was the plan, is to just soil the shit out of that name and then change it. And but it stuck. Like, people liked it. And then they just told me, and then we went, we were doing mostly in that Montgomery area, and then we picked up this show rather early in my career down in Pensacola, which was it was on TV. It was locally televised, and it had a huge following, and it was one of the better shows I've ever been a part of. And when I went down there, they're like, well, this is a new territory, and that name really caught on, in the one we were in before, so stick with it. And I never really did change it until a few years ago. I kind of wanted to develop something a little different, just some new characters to do. Because the thing about Chris Ace is he wasn't a character with a whole lot of depth. He was just a guy wrestling, and I wanted to do something that I could sink my teeth into a little bit more. Which guys do that a lot. It's like once you kind of get on up in your veterancy, you get on up in age, and you don't want to just have the action-packed matches anymore. You don't want to come off the top rope and do crazy stuff, and you want it to be more about the entertainment value. You get a character with a little bit more depth. So I had, when I first contacted that show in Sylacauga, they said, man, we really need heels. And I said, oh, I can do heel. So I said, I'm going to come up with something a little different. I don't know what kind of audience you have and where they're from. That's why I keep making these. When I make these regional references, I want to make sure that they understand what I'm talking about. And if I were to ask you, what is the one town in this area where people would despise you just from being there, from there?
Who, me?
Yeah.
Oh, one town in this area?
Yeah.
God, pretty much any place I go, but I don't really.
Oh my Lord. Well, anyway, my answer to that question is Mountain Brook. It's like so richest area in town. People are kind of full of themselves, and I mean no offense to anybody from Mountain Brook. I know a lot of wonderful people. A lot of wonderful people. I'm willing to bet, no offense to you either, that no one from Mountain Brook watches your show. So,
probably not. No, I wouldn't think so.
But I do know a lot of good people there. But as a whole, you suck. The average equals suck. Yeah. So I just man, how would people in Sylacauga view Mountain Brook? I mean, they would despise.
Oh God.
So what I did is I started going around to these towns and just finding whatever little yuppie rich town was in the area. Like when I was down in the Gulf Coast, Fairhope obviously was where I was from. and because it doesn't have to be real when they say from Birmingham, Alabama. I don't actually have to be from Birmingham. I can be from wherever I want. And it's like, I go back to that guy I mentioned before, Mike Jackson. I heard him tell this girl, like, go tell him that you were once the Southeastern champion. And she said, but I wasn't. And he looked at her, he says, honey, wrestling's a work. Go tell him you were the champion. and so it doesn't have to be, don't let the facts get in the way, of the good story. So I just started having myself announced from these, yuppie towns, and that maybe the rest of the people just resent. That right there gives me a leg up on the heat. And then, so I went and I said, all right, what is a name that someone would have that makes me just want to kick their ass for them having that name? And it's like, oh man, it's those yuppie rich douchebags with two first names. Like their last name could double as a first name kind of thing, or having a name that might be a first name that might be someone's last name, like Smith, like Smith Johnson, just something like that. Just, that's going to be a douchebag. And if there actually is a Smith Johnson, it'll give you great attention for him to sue us. But so I just suddenly I came up with the idea. I'm like, I want to be Aaron Nicholas. That just sounds like a douchebag. So that's the name I went with. Yeah, total douchebag. Yeah. And then I went and I bought this Ivy League sweater to like wear to the ring. And I mean, I had regular wrestling gear on under it, but I bought this Ivy League sweater. I would tell everybody I went to Princeton University, just all this stuff, just making me, my goal was to be as much like the antagonist in Animal House as I possibly could be.
Oh, God.
The douchebag fraternity, that was my character. And it was a fun character. And that's when I got elevated like that. I'm like, I started winning titles left and right. You show up, and that's the real competition I'm talking about. I created a character. No one gave me that character. The competition was create this character, and that character served its purpose. That was the real competition of wrestling. And that character, like, because not that this is the reason somebody puts a title on somebody, but to me, I do view titles as legitimate, because even though you didn't, like you would in the UFC or in boxing, beat someone for that title, you earn that title. Because if a promoter makes you earn the title and says, all right, I'm going to put this belt on you because the crowd wants it on you, or if you're a heel, because the crowd doesn't want it on you, that's the competition you want. And in Sylacauga, they kept the title on me for a full year. And they started passing it around like a hotcake after they took it off me. But he gave it to me and said, I'm going to keep it on you as long as you're over with the crowd. And it just kept going on and on and on and on and on. Basically, as a heel, you don't want the crowd to get tired of hating you. The best advice that I could give to somebody that wants to be a heel wrestler is watch Star Wars. Darth Vader is the greatest bad guy in history. And this is why. He's obviously evil. You don't want him to win because he's just too damn evil. But he's so cool and entertaining, you just can't get enough of him. But I mean, because it's a very fine line, because if you make him too cool and then people start rooting for him, that's not good either. That's not what a bad guy's supposed to be. You don't want people to like you. You want them to despise you, but you want them to want to despise you. Like, they don't hate you so much, they just want you to go away. God, I can't stand this guy. I can't wait till somebody kicks his ass, and then he loses his belt and then he has to just leave and go away. That's not what you want. You've got to be despicable enough to be hated, but entertaining enough to want to be hated. And if you look at it, that's exactly what Darth Vader is. There's not a person who wants him to win. There's not a person. And he has his like baby face turn at the end. Sorry, I forgot to say spoiler alert for somebody who, hadn't seen the movie from 1983. But, he has his baby face turn. So that kind of allows you to like him a little bit more. But, and that the characterization of the original Star Wars trilogy is perfect. It's the perfect heel babyface dynamic. Because one reason that you didn't root for Darth Vader to win, even without the babyface turn at the end, was because of an effective babyface to cheer. If Luke Skywalker was a douche, then, everybody would have wanted Vader, I just want Vader to kill this little brat. But, he was an effective good guy going up against an effective bad guy. And they created probably one of the greatest, not necessarily the greatest character dynamics in cinema history, but the greatest character dynamics in a professional wrestling mindset you could possibly have.
Good analogy. So how long have you been doing this and plan on doing it forever? Or?
Well, I think that, first question, how long? I started in 2001. And, I've had periods that I took off, so, in the last 20 years, I've probably done it for 10, here, taking a year off here and there and, life getting in the way and whatnot. And, and even when I hadn't been doing it, I was pretty well attentive to what was going on and keeping in touch with the guys and just following the business. It's just that sometimes, us being in Birmingham and not necessarily a wrestling hotbed makes it harder, because if there was a show that was 30 minutes away, I'd probably be there every week. But, having a family and everything, it's harder. Because there's shows that are closer, but I just don't enjoy. And then there's shows that I absolutely love that are 4 hours away. So I don't know that it's really worth all that. But, my general rule is I do it until it's not fun. I stopped doing those shows in Sylacauga and Jasper because they just ceased being fun. And it suddenly became an obligation. And I just didn't feel it was worth it. And I miss the fans there. They were actually some really cool fans. And if the right opportunity came back, I might go back. But, when I go to a new show, I say, okay, I'm committing to this one time. If I have fun, I'll come back. And then I'll stay until I'm just not having fun anymore. Kind of like when I went to that Atmore show, at first it was a blast. And I was planning on once a month. He asked me if I could do every 2 weeks. And I was like, heck yeah, I had fun. So I went down there every 2 weeks for like 6 months. And then it just kind of got to, when I got tedious again, I was just done. I don't know. I think if you want to do this at my age, that should be your rule of thumb, is that, dude, this is about fun. No matter how good I get, I could become the greatest wrestler on the planet. But because of my age, no one, not WWE, not AEW, no one's going to come knocking at my door. And so I got that out of my head, 15 years ago. Because honestly, not to say that it can't happen, but these days, especially the training that they have available, they're not really bringing older guys in unless they're well established. And by older, I mean, if you hit 25 and you're not already kind of in WWE's development territories, you may as well hang it up. I mean, I encourage you to wrestle as long as you want, but forget about WWE. It's a young man's game. I was thinking about the other day, when you and I were growing up, baseball felt like it was a lot more popular then than it is now. Mm-hmm. And I remember a couple of players, like there was a catcher for the White Sox named Carlton Fisk, the famous Fenway Park guy, he waved the ball fair, Mm-hmm. He was still playing baseball and catching at 47, which is insane to me. And now, it's like if a catcher hits 30, it's like, all right, man, go down to the bullpen. You're second string. I mean, you have rare cases like somebody like Brady who.
I was fixing to say, man, he's gonna be.
Yeah, I know. I'm gonna pass away, and Brady's still gonna be playing football.
When he said he wanted to play till he was 50, I laughed and I thought, "What's this guy crazy?" And I'm like, "Wait a second."
Dude, I saw a post after the Hall of Fame last month, and it said that in the duration of Brady's career, Calvin Johnson got drafted, retired, got inducted into the Hall of Fame, and Brady still played.
God.
Brady had already won a Super Bowl, maybe even 2 when Calvin Johnson got drafted, and now he's in the Hall of Fame.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, you have phenom, but and I don't know. I think Fisk was a little bit of a phenom too. It's not like every catcher was 47, but you had a lot of older players. But I mean, it seems like wrestling, just like all the other sports, it's a young man's game. I mean, when's the last time that? Emmitt Smith played into his mid-30s. I mean, when's the last time that? Yeah. So when's the last time there was an NFL running back that played into his 30s as a relevant back? I mean, you got Adrian Peterson. Yeah, but I mean, even then, it's like, look how hard it was for him. He breaks the did he break the NFL rushing record single season or come closer? Okay,
he broke. You talking about Peterson or Smith?
Peterson
broke the single season rushing record.
Okay, yeah. So, but then 2 years later, he's having a hard time finding a job. Now, given there was an injury, but still, it's like, I'm sorry, if you set the single season rushing record in your 30s. And then tear your ACL the next year, I feel like you should still be able to get a starting job in the NFL. And he had a lot of people that wanted him, but nobody wanted him as the feature back. And it just feels like it's a young man's game. And, wrestling is kind of the same way. It's a young man's game. But there are some exceptions to that too. I mean, you look at somebody like Chris Jericho. I mean, he's wrestling's Tom Brady. I mean, that man, he's got to be pushing 50 too. And the thing is like, before the Undertaker retired, he was in his 50s, and he is, but he was wrestling once a year. And Jericho's still going out there every week like it's 1995. And that's somebody who's been around forever. He was when I turned wrestling on for the very first time in high school in 1998, he was one of the first people that was on the TV. And here he is, 23 years later and still doing it. It's crazy.
So, what about injuries? How many injuries you had?
I've been fortunate. Majority of my injuries have been more like bumps and bruises. Most of my injuries have actually occurred in the weight room, But the one injury that I did have in the wrestling ring was actually a pretty serious one, though. This was back in 2002. I was, I was slated to win the title, and I was wanting to have a really big performance. And WWE Scout was there, and I just really wanted to just steal the show. And this was my youthful arrogance. I was only 20 years old, and so I tried something I probably shouldn't have tried. And we had planned, this is when I was younger, so I did plan a little bit more. Plus, we were in what's called a four corners match, which just basically means you have four guys, every man for himself. So when you have multiple people in the match like that, sometimes there is a little bit more of a necessity for some planning. But I had planned this one spot, and the guy kind of got out of position and didn't allow me to do what I had wanted to do. And but I still wanted to get that one in because that was my highlight. And there was video cameras going, and I needed this highlight. And so I tried to do it anyway, even though he was out of position. And I landed against the steel guardrail and knocked myself out and separated my shoulder. And so needless to say, I didn't win the title because I was unconscious. And actually got a free ambulance ride, and had a concussion, and a severe concussion, and a separated shoulder. So
is that the shoulder still giving you problems today?
Not really, because it gave me problems for a long time, but truthfully, my weightlifting injuries on my shoulders have been worse. I've torn my rotator cuff weightlifting. I've torn my labrum weightlifting. So I think I made a pretty full recovery from that. There was one period of, I think it was about 5 years after the accident, that I was having some issues with just some inflammation in that shoulder. But since then, though, not really. It's been, it's deformed. You probably can't see it on here, but there's a little bump right there. But other than that, there's no pain.
Chris, what closing statement do you have for us?
What closing statement do I? Go to the gym.
Go to the gym.
Go to the gym.
Eat protein.
Eat healthy. And this is a closing statement for those who want to get in wrestling. You told me that there was a lot of guys that are wrestling fans. You might just be wrestling fans, but if you're somebody who wants to get in wrestling, take care of your physique, eat right, work out, hire a trainer. It's easier to get now than ever. Go to YouTube. You can listen to trainers talk and show you workouts there. But for those of you who aren't interested in wrestling, soul of the business. There's my closing statement. Soul of the business. Get in touch with it. Look, get the classics out. Get Steamboat and Flair. Get, there's so many guys out there that maybe people aren't aware of. The old, what was that organization? The Mid-South, amazing organization, great work. The NWA Atlantic, that was great. You can order all those. I don't know if they're available digitally, but you can order all the DVDs from Jim Cornette's website. He's got all that NWA Atlantic stuff. It's some great wrestling. A lot of wrestlers you probably never heard of, but just are great in learning and feeling and knowing the the talent that's been in the business all these years.
All right. Thanks a lot, Chris. Ace.